We're going to work our way through a tremendous amount of issues. But the first issue that I want to discuss is, as I'm sure you're both aware, there were protests on campuses, probably Harvard a little more extensively than Princeton. The National Guard and the Marines were not sent in, from what I can remember. In Los Angeles, the National Guard and the Marines are being sent in. How unusual is this? Is this something throughout history that we have found quelling, as Trump called it, insurrections and rebellions? What kind of unusual waters are we swimming in right now? Let's start with Jill.
Well, it is extremely unusual. I think it's almost difficult to use any kind of yardstick against the past to understand this moment, not to sort of put Kevin and I out of business here in the sense that, like, I'm just not so sure. So, someone has asked me, what about Kent State? Okay, May 1970. Nixon announces on television the U.S. is going to be bombing Cambodia just after kind of the anti-war movement had quieted down. It's the end of the semester. I think he was thinking he could sort of get away with it. And protests are up on campuses across the country. And in Ohio, I think the ROTC building was burned down one night. And the mayor of Kent asks the governor to bring in the National Guard. It isn't Nixon who's sending in the National Guard.
Right.
And then, of course, fatefully, the guardsmen fire on the students and kill four.
Four people.
I think, it's a terrible moment. I think we tend to forget how supportive Americans were of the decision to bring in the guardsmen. I think a poll done right after that shooting, 58% of Americans blamed the students for the violence. So I think we would do well to, consider moments like Kent State and the shooting on Jackson State, the historically Black college in Mississippi, where a shooting followed. And then recall that even after that in New York, where there was a funeral for one of the students killed at Kent State, there was the Hard Hat riot, where construction workers who were building the World Trade Center attacked the students who were who'd come out to protest the war during the funeral for the Kent State victims. So, there has been a lot of violence around protests that have involved the use of the military in American history. But again, I feel like that's such a lousy analogy. Like, what piece of that really helps us to understand what's going on in LA and what I think is likely to be going on in cities across the country over the weekend?
Well, maybe as I hear you discuss it, maybe the one theme that carries through it is that authoritarianism, for whatever myth we tell ourselves as Americans, is a relatively popular response when it's considered as being a lever against what some would say is disorder. Others would say peaceful riots. Kevin, do you agree with that? Is this, so much of this is about, well, is he allowed to invoke these, there's the Posse Comitatus Act that keeps him from sending in the guard, but then he can invoke the Insurrection Act, which he hasn't done. Do you look at it through that prism or more what Jill is talking about?
More what Jill is talking about. And I think the examples Jill gave are two really good ones. And I'm really glad to see that she paired Kent State with the Hard Hat riot, because I think we have to really think about both sides of this coin, because it's not about simply putting down disorder. It's not about simply arresting people who are committing lawlessness.